Hello, everyone. Can everyone hear me? Can I see a thumbs up? Good. Perfect. Office. I am Celine Layog. I am the Trade Commissioner for the Philippine Trade and Investment Center, Silicon Valley. Our office currently covers Northern California and the Pacific Northwest region of the United States. And very recently, we started covering parts of Canada, particularly Vancouver and Calgary. So thanks to all who registered for today's workshop on how to franchise your business, leveraging partnerships for business expansion. This is a project between the Philippine Trade and Investment Center, Silicon Valley, the Philippine Consulate General in San Francisco, and the Philippine Consulate General in Vancouver, Canada. Today, we are fortunate to have experts from the Philippine Franchise Association of the Philippines, or the PFA. For those who are not familiar yet with the PFA, PFA is home to the Philippines' most trusted franchise brands, many of which have overseas outlets already or are ready to go international. And guided by its mission to promote franchising as a tool to create business and jobs, PFA has transformed the Philippine franchising sector into an important contributor to the Philippine economy. PFA is currently the Secretariat of the Asia-Pacific Franchise Confederation and a member of the Technical Working Group of the World Franchise Council, whose task is to create activities that will advance franchising globally. PFA also organizes Franchise Asia Philippines, the biggest franchise show in Asia and one of the biggest in the world. Our speaker from PFA, Chris Lim, will later share more information about this. So our speakers are all eager to have a conversation with our participants to help you as business owners grow your business. I just wanted to share some house rules. We encourage you, our participants, to turn on your videos. In the course of the presentations, you may type your questions using the chat box at the bottom of your screen. We will be monitoring the chat box for questions so that it may be addressed by the speakers in the course of their presentation. We have allotted time for Q&A after the third workshop presentation. So for this portion of the program, the Q&A portion, participants can type "Ask Live" in the chat box, and I will cue you for a speaking slot so you can talk directly to our speakers. And then fourth and last, feel free to actively participate, ask questions, and share your experiences. Let's make this workshop a truly collaborative and enriching experience for everyone involved. So why don't we practice the use of the chat box? Can you type in the chat box where you are joining us from? If you can share, the country and the state you're from, that would be very helpful. Let's see. Let's hear from our engaging audience. So we have from Winnipeg, Vancouver, Calgary. Wow. Kudos to Canada. We have Dallas, Texas. We have from Washington State. Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much for joining us today. We have someone from Burlingame. Great. Okay, that was fun. And, it goes to show how engaging and how excited our participants are. So, as I mentioned, this would not have been possible without the partnership with the Philippine Consulate General in San Francisco and Philippine Consulate General in Vancouver. So to officially start our program, may we invite Consul General Arlene Magno of the Philippine Consulate General in Vancouver, Canada. Consul General Arlene, may I ask you to...
Trade Commissioner Celine Layog, our resource speakers from the Philippine Franchise Association, participants to this franchising workshop, good afternoon from Vancouver. We are pleased to be organizing this activity with the Philippine Consulate General in San Francisco, the Philippine Trade and Investment Center, Silicon Valley, and of course, the Philippine Franchising Association under the leadership of its president, Chris Lim. We had the opportunity of meeting Chris Lim in Vancouver in early March, where we had an interesting discussion on franchising in general and the Philippines as a franchising destination, and where we considered the possibility of teaming up with the US on a franchising webinar or workshop for Filipino businesses in the West Coast. We are glad to finally see this happen today. For the time that franchising has been around in the Philippines, it has grown significantly over the last decade, with a new attention being given to non-American brands and non-food products. The franchising industry in the Philippines is indeed vibrant and thriving, and is a major contributor to economic growth. The flip side of that coin is the simultaneous expansion of more global Filipino products or brands. We would like to see more Philippine businesses abroad scale up and enter new markets using the franchise business model for obvious economic reasons. Franchising, however, as I learned from Chris, is more than just exporting a particular Filipino brand or product. It is also an effective way of promoting our culture and our people. The Philippine Consulate General in Vancouver, therefore, is pleased to be collaborating on a project that will not only prosper the stakeholders and nurture an entrepreneurial spirit among Filipinos, but will at the same time advance knowledge about our country and foster closer people-to-people ties. Canada is a much smaller market than the US or even the Philippines for that matter. But I hope those listening in from Vancouver and other cities in Canada, as well as San Francisco, will find these presentations helpful today and perhaps one day decide to expand their reach. So once again, a pleasant afternoon to all.
As well. Thank you very much for the support, Conjan Arlene. Next speaker would be Consul General Neil Frank Ferrer from the Philippine Consulate General in San Francisco. He is currently on official travel right now, but he is sharing with us his message via video.
Consul General Arlene Magno of the Philippine Consulate General in Vancouver, Trade Commissioner Celine Layug, our eminent speakers from the Philippine Franchise Association, Mr. Chris Lim, Mr. Noel Sigawat, and Attorney Mau Macaraeg, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I wish all of you a good day. I would also like to welcome all of you who are joining us today for this insightful webinar on how to expand business through franchising. We are fortunate to have on board our foremost franchise experts in the country today. They are entrepreneurs themselves, and with their diverse backgrounds, coupled with their international experience, I hope that aspiring business owners attending today's webinar may learn a lot from them, collaborate with them, and leverage opportunities for partnerships. To our entrepreneurs, your presence here demonstrates your drive and ambition to not only prosper and grow your business, but also contribute to the growth of the Philippine economy. Fresh from recovering from the pandemic, the Philippine economy has been experiencing a remarkable upward trajectory. With a growth rate of 7.6% last year, the country ranked among the highest growths in the world. This growth is a testament to the resilience and entrepreneurial spirit that define the business landscape in the Philippines. With our virtual gathering today, we cannot help feeling optimistic for the future. We hope that the Philippines continues to stay the course in becoming a $1 trillion economy within the next decade. The government is committed to realizing this vision by focusing on key areas such as physical and digital infrastructure, energy security, agriculture, fiscal discipline, education, healthcare, and harnessing public-private partnerships. These strategic efforts are aimed at creating an environment that fosters business growth, attracts investment, and empowers entrepreneurs like yourselves to flourish. Franchising has proven to be a successful and mutually beneficial business model, offering a unique opportunity for both franchisors and franchisees. It allows entrepreneurs to leverage established brands, systems, and support networks, while also providing employment opportunities and contributing to the growth of the local economy. Today, our distinguished speakers will share their expertise, experiences, and insights on how to navigate the world of franchising in the Philippines. They will provide you with valuable guidance in expanding your businesses and managing a successful franchise business. I encourage you to actively participate in the discussions and take full advantage of the knowledge-sharing opportunities presented here today. Remember, your success as entrepreneurs not only benefits you individually, but also contributes to the overall growth and development of the Philippine economy. Together, we can foster a thriving business franchise ecosystem that generates employment, encourages innovation, and drives economic prosperity for all. Once again, a warm welcome to all of you. Thank you for being part of this webinar, and I wish you a fruitful conversation. Mabuhay!
But again, thank you very much, Consul General Neil Frank Ferrer, for those words. And definitely, we've seen, especially during the pandemic, we've seen the growth of entrepreneurship among our kababayans here, the Filipino Americans and the Filipino Canadians, as well as our entrepreneurs in the Philippines. And we are glad that we are presenting together a platform that can help you, a tool. And that's why we have the experts here from the Philippine Franchise Association. So with that, let me just briefly go through our program and presentations for this afternoon. It's going to be, because we are going to do a deep dive with our experts, we've allotted, a considerable amount of time for each of the topics. So the first one will be the franchise advantage with Mr. Chris Lim. It will be about 20 minutes. So maybe Chris, you can say hi and say something.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Chris. I'm the president of the PFA. Thank you everyone who's joining us here today. Really excited. Was excited to do this. Especially, I have an affinity to Canada. I used to live in Coquitlam in British Columbia. So glad to see a lot of people from Vancouver, from BC, and of course all over North America. I'll spend 20 minutes later on to talk about the franchise advantage. I think before we dig deep into how to franchise your business, maybe understand first is franchising right for you? Is that really the right growth path for you? So looking forward to that discussion later on.
Thank you very much, Chris. Sorry, did I fail to mention earlier when I introduced you that Chris is the president of the Philippine Franchise Association, right? Okay, and then we move to our second presentation, the franchise development process, which will be about 40 minutes with Mr. Noel Sigawat, Managing Director of FranCorp Philippines. And if I may say, Noel, as part of your introduction, co-author of the 12 Strategies of Franchising book and the Franchise Advantage ASEAN edition. Would you like to say hi, Noel?
Yes, thank you, Ms. Arlene. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Franchise Your Business Seminar. I'm Noel Sigawat, Managing Director of FranCorp Philippines. So at FranCorp, we help businesses venture into franchising, and we've been doing that for over 25 years. So we've helped brands like Jollibee, Max's, Goldilocks, Bench and Pen Shop, and over 800 others franchise not only in the Philippines, but in other countries as well. So later on, I'll spend a few minutes talking about the franchise development process, more specifically to talk about two questions that business owners have about going into franchising. Number one is how to tell if your business is franchisable. And secondly, how to put a franchise program together. So looking forward to it, and I'll talk in more detail later on. Ms. Arlene?
Okay, thank you very much, Noel. And then our last speaker for today's workshop will cover the legal considerations for franchising in the US and Canada. So attorney Mo Mohammed Al-Turk, partner, International Commercial, Baker McKenzie. So he will be covering it for about 20 minutes. Attorney Mo, would you like to say hi?
Hello.
There you go.
Thank you, Ms. Arlene. Thank you, everyone, for having me. I'm a partner in the Dallas office of Baker McKenzie, an international law firm. I practice international commercial law, and a big part of my practice is helping franchisors in the U.S. and Canada, in the Philippines, and all over the world. So I'm glad to be with you today.
Thank you, attorney. So now let's do the deep dive with the presentations. So Chris, if it's okay with you, I will turn over the screen and our participants over to you for the franchise advantage segment.
Sure, thanks for that, TC Celine, and of course to Conjen Arlene. Thank you very much as well for organizing this together, of course, with other PTIC offices. Let me share my screen now. Yeah, so I said I'm Chris. I'm the president of the Philippine Franchise Association, but as well as the CEO of FranCorp. And I wanted to spend about 20 minutes just to talk to you a bit more about franchising. But just so I know who's in the room, I know we saw and all of you did write where you're from. If you're able to turn on your cameras, it would be fantastic. It's just, you know, great to be seeing people. Would love to have your cameras on so I could see you and know you're there. But at the same time, just in the chat box, could I understand a bit more about if you could say what your business name is and roughly what do you do? I mean, are you a food, a service, a retail company? Just so I have an idea as well, who's in the room. Yeah, if you could just chat that in the chat box, it'd be great. So at least we can see. So just what your business name is, and yeah, I think what type of business is it? Is it in food, in service, in retail? As everyone's doing that, so I know I see Vincent's in an immigration consultancy. That's good. Thanks, Vincent. Love Triangle, food-based business. As we're doing that, as that's coming in, let me start off then. Just a quick introduction to the Philippine Franchise Association. So the Philippine Franchise Association is the main franchise association in the Philippines. We have about 800 plus brands in the association. And some of them you'd know, some of them you won't know, but you know, these are some of the biggest brands. But from the micro brands to the big brands, you know, some brands that have 3 or 4 stores to brands that have 2,000 stores are part of the association. And we're also part of the World Franchise Council. So that World Council includes the US, Canada. So we talk to over 40 countries every year, talking and seeing how to develop the franchise industry. And thank you for the rest who've sent. I saw Winkle Tea and Donuts, Zoe Foods, Corinthian Distributors, Anna Lu, representing the Canada Trade Council in Canada. Thank you very much for sharing that. So at least I have a good idea the background of the businesses. So a mix of food and services. Just to give you a quick overview of franchising, you know, how big the US, Canada, and the Philippines is. You know, the Canada is still the largest, the US is the largest franchise market in the world. Of course, franchising started in Canada with about almost 800,000 outlets in the US. In Canada, it's 76,000, and the Philippines is about 200,000 franchise outlets. In fact, the Philippines is the 7th largest franchise market in the world. But you guys, I think those in US, Canada, you are in some of the largest franchise markets in the world. And with franchising, it's not all about food. If you see between the 3 countries, less than half are actually in food. In fact, in the US, 50% in service, Canada as well. So service franchise, especially in more developed markets, is a very big thing. So those in food, franchising, of course, is a great way to grow. But those who are not in food, so I know we have someone in immigration consultancy, that is also a possible thing to franchise. In fact, FranCorp, which is the largest franchise consulting company in the Philippines, is actually an American company. It's a franchise of a franchise consultancy. So you can see franchising applies to a lot of different sectors. Now the franchise advantage, and this is what I'll be talking about in the next 15 more minutes or so. The 3 advantages of franchising is its growth with managed risk, growth tapping other people's resources, and it equalizes the playing field. If I were to summarize the 3 advantages of franchising, it's really this. And that's what I'll elaborate on a bit more. First, I'll talk about growth with managed risks. As with anyone, as with anyone here, you know, there comes a point in our business where we're thinking, how do I grow more? Some people decide, okay, if I'm about to open a second branch or I want to expand into a new state, I'll use my internal funds. You know, I've saved up over a few years. I'll start to borrow either I get a loan, I'll get new investors, or you'll put in internally generated funds. On the flip side, some people decide, no, I want to enter from, I'm based in BC, I want to enter Toronto. Let me find a partner, a dealer, a distributor, or a wholesaler there. These have been the typical ways people have grown their businesses. But there are a lot of risks. If you invest your own money, time, capital, you know, if it's a company-owned store, you have the capital and manpower risk. So you're putting in the money, as well as, you know, there's the manpower risk, you know, it's not cheap. Labor is not cheap, of course, in North America. So you have that risk of the full-time labor that you're getting without, you know, not unsure at what the returns are. Some people then decide, I don't want to put in money. I'll get a partner. I'll get a distributor. The issue on this side is you don't have control. You know, typically dealers, partners, distributors, you don't have too much control in terms of how they operate the business. You know, if they want to go in and change a few things, there's very little that you can actually control. That's where franchising comes in. Franchising actually manages the risk. It tries to minimize your capital and manpower risk because you're using someone else, you're tapping someone else's funds and capital and time. But at the same time, franchising gives you a level of control because you prescribe an operations manual, you train them how to operate it, and they commit to following your systems and procedures. So one of the big advantages of franchising is that you're able to grow, but you're managing your risk. The second is money, time, and organizations. So I'll pause for a question again. Imagine, just imagine right now, how many branches do you think, or how many branches do you think you will have in the next 5 years, both locally and internationally? How many branches do you think you can have in the next 5 years? If number one, you had access to almost unlimited capital. You know, someone says here, you can have $100 million. All you need to do is use that to open as many stores as you can. So imagine you had unlimited capital. But at the same time, they also say you have unlimited time. We will give you a lot of, you know, managers, senior managers, staff. You can have your pick of the best ones. As well as we'll connect you to local landlords, local connections, local business owners will connect you. So you get the money, you get the people, the time, you get the organizational. How many stores do you think you will have in the next 5 years if you had that money, time, and organization? Could you write it in the chat box? How many stores do you think you'll have in the next 5 years? Just go wild. Just dream big, of course. How many stores, you know? The cakery, you suddenly have so much, the money, the time, organizations. I see Ron saying 500, Vincent saying 5. So it's a consultancy. So I assume you're entering 5 states. Anna Lu saying at least 1 in every country. I love the ambition here. Do please share. So franchising starts with a vision, really. How many are you really looking at? And I know it sounds ridiculous. It sounds ridiculous that someone's suddenly going to give you $100 million tomorrow, give you so many people. But in essence, that's one of the big advantages of franchising. You know, it's duplicating the success of your business by utilizing other people's money, time, and organization. So a few very important things here. One is it's duplicating the success. So what franchising doesn't do is suddenly make your an unprofitable business profitable. So don't get into franchising because you think it's your way to more profits. It's not. Franchising, think of it as a photocopying machine. You have a success model, you're copying it. If your model right now is losing money, all you're replicating is a losing business model. Okay, so be very clear. It's duplicating the success. And you duplicate that because you're tapping the money, the time, the organization of other people. Let's talk about money, capital for expansion. The beauty with franchising is it's the franchising that provides the capital for the franchise units. So imagine it costs you $500,000 to open every store. Your next 10 stores would cost you $5 million. With franchising, you're not putting in that capital. In fact, someone else is putting in that capital to open that stores. Equally important is that not only are they putting the capital to open the stores, they're actually paying you a fee to open that. They pay you a franchise fee. A franchise fee is typically a fixed fee. And it's announced, if you say it's $20,000, it's $20,000. But the franchise fee isn't really a major part of your income. The franchise fee is there to cover a lot of your costs because it costs you money to actually get a franchisee. To get them, to find them, to train them, to look at their locations, to support them. It costs you money. You need to make sure you have enough money to be able to actually recoup that investment and make a bit of profit. Where a lot more profit comes in is the royalty. Franchise fee is a one-time thing, but royalty is monthly. So royalty is a percentage of sales that you pay, that the franchisee pays to the franchisor. And this is because you give them ongoing support, but they're using your name, your system, and you're giving them ongoing support. Then you have the advertising fees where they can pay a certain amount every month so that you can advertise and build the brand. Imagine that not only did they put money to open your store, they're paying you fees, and they're also funding your marketing so that you can increase, so that you can make your brand even bigger. Plus, of course, they buy products from the franchisor as well. Typically, they buy products from the franchisor. So quite a few different revenue streams. And there are legal things that to consider later on here. But just roughly, that's what franchising is about in terms of when I say you now have access to unlimited capital. It's that because your capital now is anyone who wants to invest, any franchisee. And there's so many potential franchises in the US, in Canada, or all over the world, and in the Philippines as well. You can tap that as your source of capital. But beyond that as well is committed management. Imagine if every store that you open, from Calgary, you decide to open in Toronto. From California, you want to open in Washington. Or from California, you decide you want to open in Mexico. Imagine if that store is actually run by someone like you, someone who put in money to open the store, someone who, I'm sure all of us during the pandemic, we didn't sleep till we find ways to make sure our business survives. That's the committed management that you get, because the franchisee puts in the money, they have the operational responsibility. The beauty with franchising is you get that committed relationship because they have skin in the game. They put in investment. It's a long-term relationship, and there are studies that say franchisees outperform salaried employees because the franchisee knows that their income doesn't come from their salary. It comes from the profits and the dividends they get from the business. So they have that commitment. It's a leaner organization as well because manpower, recruitment, the day-to-day responsibilities for the management is actually done by the franchisee. So if you need 10 people, I see Care America Home Services providing non-medical private duty caregivers. Imagine if you needed 20 caregivers or 30 caregivers in every center. If you needed 10 centers, you'd be managing 300 caregivers. But with franchising, you won't have to hire 300 caregivers. The franchisee hires that. Who you're managing are the franchisees and your franchise support team. So that's the idea here. It creates a leaner organization, and the day-to-day responsibility is shifted to the franchisee. While you're managing the bigger picture, building the brand, consulting them, making sure that they're making money, and really looking into their operations as well to help support them as they want to grow. By the way, if you have any questions, feel free to write it in the chat box. So I'm monitoring the chat box. So at least if I can answer it within my presentation, I'll answer it. We'll also have Q&As later. But if there are any questions with what I'm saying, feel free, just write it on the chat box. So I've talked about how franchising manages the risk, how franchising helps you expand using other people's money, time, and organizations. I want to talk about franchising creating an equal playing field. So the beauty with franchising is, and this is why, you know, when I was I was in Canada, I was in Vancouver early this year. I was with Congen Arlene, as well as Ambassador Austria. And we were saying, you know, we have so many Filipino-owned businesses in Canada and the US, Phil Canadian-owned businesses. And we said we want a lot more of these businesses to be able to compete with the established players locally. You know, compete with the McDonald's of this world, the Subway, the Tim Hortons, and all these things. How do we compete? And it sounds such a daunting task. The beauty with franchising, it tries to equalize that playing field, because now you have the access to the same money, time, capital that a lot of these players have. Maybe not, of course, the ones in the stock market, in the stock exchange, but with all the players, even if you're a 1-2-year-old company, you'd have a similar access to those that are 10, 20-year-old companies. And franchise success can come from any starting point. A lot of these brands you may not know because you're based in the US, but I intentionally wanted to use some of these brands. Of course, you know the stories of McDonald's and the success of that. There's a whole movie, Spraynet in Canada, Tim Hortons, Subway. There's so many success stories in the US and Canada, and you can Google a lot of them. I want to talk a bit more about, these are more Filipino companies, and just to share with you that franchise success can come from any starting point. Farron Cafe. Any idea how much a Starbucks Frappuccino costs? Maybe you can put it in the chat box. How much is a Starbucks Frappuccino? You buy any Starbucks Frappuccino, it's probably, I assume in the US, it's maybe closer to $5-6. Here in the Philippines, yeah, so $6. In the Philippines, it's about $3. And Farron Cafe was founded by a 20-year-old couple. They were actually, one of them's a nursing student. They both love coffee, and it costs $3 here. And they realized, you know, if they drink a Starbucks every day, that's two of them, $6 every day. It was so expensive. So they pioneered the $1 Frappuccino here in the Philippines. And they were just 28 years old, not really into business, a nursing student. And they started Farron Cafe. You know, they scaled up to about 200 stores with that idea. Turk Shawarma, one of the largest, I think they have about 800 stores right now. Turk Shawarma started with 40 stores, just a kiosk, 4 square meter to 8 square meter kiosk. From 40 stores, they scaled up to about 500 stores in just 2 years. Generics Pharmacy. The Generics Pharmacy is a chain of generic medicine pharmacies in the Philippines. They started with just 1 store. Actually, the mindset here was a distributor. I saw someone here, I think is more in the distributorship business. So the story of the Generics Pharmacy is they're the distributor business. He used to import and sell generic medicines, and he tried to go into Mercury Drug, which is like our version of CVS or those. Try to enter all these big pharmacies, all these retail chains, and they wouldn't take his medicine, or a lot of the big chains didn't want. And then he opened just 1 small store beneath his office, which always had a lot of people. And he realized, I'm onto something. You know, he opened this small, not very nice looking store, but it was packed. People were coming from all over buying the medicine. So he decided, instead of me relying on other retailers, why don't I create my own retail chain? But he was very clear, and I'm sure the distributors here, you know, distribution and retailing are such different businesses. So he said, no, I don't want to get into retailing. So he opened the store, but then franchised everything else. He said other people can do the retailing. His main point was he wants to build a brand and have distribution channels. So in 3 years, he grew to 900 stores. Now they have about 2,000. They have over 2,000 stores. And the beauty is he now has 2,000 distribution channels, 2,000 retail channels that he doesn't own and operate, but he has a good control on it. Just because, of course, it's under his brand, he can train them, he supports them. So that's a beauty. Vibes, another story, very interesting story. When I say you can come from any starting point, I even Vibes is owned by a visually impaired individual. Vibes is the visually impaired brotherhood for excellent service. The story here, very inspirational. Dante Tiosan, the late founder, was a blind individual, visually impaired individual. And in the Philippines, if you're visually impaired, you get taught how to do massages. You know, the government supports you, trains you how to do a massage. But they realize, you know what? They've trained so many blind individuals, but they don't know how to get customers because you're visually impaired. How can you go to customers? How can you go to their house? So what he did is he got 10 of them, opened the Vibes Massage Spa, and then they saw so many people were coming in because it was a fantastic massage. You know, visually impaired individuals give great massages. And he said he was onto something. With that, he franchised Vibes Massage. He grew to 60 plus stores. In fact, when I went to one of their anniversaries, he said one of the problems he has right now is that one of his problems right now is he's running out of blind individuals to help. So isn't that a great problem to have? So he was saying he's grew his business so much that he's running out of individuals to help and get into their business. Then we also have a micro lending company, you know, LTNG Credit Line, a micro lending company. These are people who lend $100 at a time, $200 to small micro business owners. He had 4 stores, grew to over 80 stores and trying to hit 100 stores this year. So when I say franchising can come from any starting point, we really mean it, you know. It doesn't mean you have to be a full-bred entrepreneur, very established, you know. There are many different starting points. The most important starting point, though, of course, is that you have a profitable business because that's about duplication. So just a few things. The franchise advantage is growth with managed risk. You accelerate the growth using other people's money, time, and people, and you create an equal playing field. So these are the 3 starter points. And I want to be very clear. I saw a question about a success story of a North American started brand that entered the Philippine market. Before I get into that, I think one point for me today is we're not here to convince you to go to the Philippines immediately. Because even people who we consult here, we say, you know, learn to walk before you run. Learn to franchise within your community first before you know, cross the ocean and into a new country. So we're not here to say, go franchise in the Philippines immediately. In fact, if you only have 1 or 2 stores, one of our recommendations is open a franchise in North America first. You're already there, you know. Most of the people I talk to here in the Philippines, they want to enter North America. And that's a very difficult thing. If you've already established a successful business, franchise first. Franchise within your community, into a new state. And then once you have to get a hang of franchising, then enter into the Philippines. Because if you have 1 store there and you suddenly try to open one in the Philippines, you'll be wasting a lot of management effort trying to manage that. You can cross state lines as well. Of course, if you want to go from from the US to Canada, Canada to the US, great, do that. But go expand in your state first. That's probably one of the biggest recommendations I can give at this stage. And we'll talk a bit more about that later on. So let me end with this slide. You know, a lot of you started your business. Some I feel are quite unique businesses, but do know Reid Hoffman is the founder of LinkedIn. He said this: the first mover advantage doesn't go to the company that starts up. It goes to the company that scales up. So to a lot of the business owners here, and when I was talking to Ambassador Austria when I was in Canada, she was so excited with a lot of the brands, some of the most unique Filipino brands there in Canada, but as well as in North America that Filipinos have started. But do know that if you find something very unique, the first mover advantage will go to the person that scales it up, not the person who invented it immediately. With that, thank you very much. That's my part of the franchise advantage. I hope it gave you just a good idea about the franchise advantage, how it can help you. And we'll then move on to the second part, which is we'll have Noel, the managing director of FranCorp, for the next 40 minutes. We'll talk a bit more about really the franchise process, the franchise development process. How do you get into franchising? How do you calculate the fees? To give you an idea, we have 40 minutes, so it won't be an extremely comprehensive book, right? So it's just to give you an initial idea. Because one important thing with franchising is that start off correctly. Don't try to do everything ad hoc, do everything just on your own, and realize when you have 100 stores that you did it wrong. Because if you do it wrong, you'll be replicating a mistake 100 times, in every store that you open. With that, thank you very much. If you had more questions, do put it in the chat box, and we'll have a Q&A later on. Thanks, everyone. Noel, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Chris. Hello again, everyone. Magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat from Metro Manila in the Philippines. Good afternoon to most everyone joining us from the US and Canada. So welcome to the Franchise Your Business seminar. I am Noel Sigawat, Managing Director of FranCorp Philippines. So as I mentioned briefly earlier, FranCorp is a consulting company that is a license of FranCorp USA. And over the past 25 years, we've helped brands in the Philippines expand within the Philippines and internationally as well. So these are brands like Goldilocks, Pen Shop, Max's, Potato Corner, and 800 other brands that we've assisted over the years. So, before I proceed, I just wanted to share that I used to live in North America as well, a long time ago. So I went to the US for my graduate business studies and also worked as a financial systems consultant in New York City for about 5 years. But at that time, we did not have seminars and learning opportunities such as this. So I would like to give credit and congratulate the Philippine Consulate Generals of Vancouver, San Francisco, and the Philippine Trade and Investment Center of Silicon Valley for organizing this seminar for Filipino-American and Filipino-Canadian businesses. And I hope that this seminar is able to give you practical ideas that you can use later on when you grow your business even more in the US, in Canada, and maybe even in the Philippines. So let me share my slide. Here we go. So I will be discussing the franchise development process. Specifically, two questions that business owners would have when they think about growing their business through franchising. So Chris gave a very compelling discussion on why franchise is a very very competitive and attractive way to grow your business. But going further, questions that are in the minds of business owners about franchising is, number one, is my business franchisable? So there are many advantages to growing your business franchise through franchising, but is my business franchisable in the first place? Second is that, if it is, how do I actually put a franchise program together? So my discussion for the next few minutes will center on these two main ideas. But before I proceed, I'd like to, I'd like to ask our participants today to share a little more about the business that they mentioned earlier, during Chris's discussion. So you mentioned about the brands that your company, the brands you represent. But I'd like to ask, what is the business concept or the product or the service that you are offering, and also some details about when that started, the month and date that you started, and the number of the branches that you currently have. So please share this information in the chat box for me to get a little more idea of the background of the participants that are joining today. So for example, business is a spa opened in February 2019 with 2 branches. Or another example would be the business or concept or the unique product is avocado desserts, opened in April 2017 with 1 store so far. So so please go ahead and share this information, and I will be able to relate this later on with the franchisability criteria. So sharing from Care America, opened in San Francisco in 2014, and in Orange County this year, and working on Nevada. Great. So yes, no, service business, very much in demand. So I think I also saw earlier Cake Carry, and I believe this is a bake shop opened in September 2019. So almost 4 years now with 1 storefront and 2 Sylvanas vending machine. Actually, I searched Cake Carry, when I saw as a participant here, and I saw that you also have some resellers, in the area. Winkle Tea and donuts, food, and I would guess tea and donuts, opened in June 2021, so fairly recent, but quite quite fast, having 4 branches already and 3 under construction. Congratulations, that's quite quite fast growth. Glow Up Aesthetics with 3 branches already. So all right, now so all right, so as I mentioned, I'll be sharing a discussion on the franchisability criteria and developing a franchise program. So when clients come to us to inquire about franchising their business, we first do an assessment of their viability as a potential franchisor. So these are the criteria we look at to determine whether the business is franchisable or not. First one would be credibility. So credibility comes in the form of brand recognition or the reputation of the company or the ownership. So the more branches you have, the longer the track record, the more favorable the reputation, the higher the credibility. The higher the credibility, the more franchisable the business is. The thing with credibility is that it comes over time. And so many many startup businesses that have been operating for maybe 1, 2, 3 years don't have a lot of brand recognition yet. So fortunately, there are other criteria that we look at, but in credibility, the more you franchise, the more franchise businesses you open, your credibility increases even more. So that's a help in terms of attractiveness to potential franchisees. Second factor we look at is differentiation. So what is the unique selling proposition of your product or service? Are there any other brands that are offering the same type of service in the market, but are you able to do something unique that makes you stand out? So as you can imagine, um, businesses that are the first to market or the pioneers in that type of service will have very high differentiation. That's because there are no other, there are no other players in the market. They're the only game in town, no? At least at that point. For example, we worked about 5 years ago with a dialysis center that wanted to grow their business through franchising. So that's very unique, no? And as you can probably imagine, they are they are the first of their kind, the first dialysis center to open as a franchise. And because of that, they were able to grow very quickly. So in spite of the investment in a dialysis center being quite high, they were able to grow up to 25 branches in a span of 2 years. Um, so the question is, do you have to be always the first mover or the pioneer to be differentiated? And the answer is no. You don't have to be the first mover to have a unique selling proposition that's not offered by others. The example I would give here is Turk shawarma. So those of you who have visited the Philippines in the last 10 years or so may be familiar with this because they're all over the malls. And so they're a cart kiosk format and sell two varieties of shawarma with or without cheese. So those of you who have tasted authentic shawarma, Middle East type of shawarma, would notice that Turk shawarma is not your typical authentic Middle Eastern tasting shawarma. It's really more of a Filipino type shawarma in that it is sweet, no? The pita bread is sweet, and also the fillings, instead of being carved from a rotisserie, the fillings are already pre-cooked and shipped from the commissary. So Turk shawarma did really well because as you are all aware, Filipinos have a lot of preference for sweet tasting foods. So we're the home of sweet spaghetti, and Jollibee is now promoting that all over the world. But Turk shawarma offered the sweet shawarma, and because of that, they were able to grow um, up to 800 branches within a span of 5 years. Not only that, they were able to charge franchise fee at a premium. So even though they are a cart and kiosk format, they are charging franchise fees that are higher than those that are charged by a typical restaurant franchise. That's because their sales were more than sufficient to command these high franchise fees. Next criteria we look at is the transferability of knowledge. So when you sign up a franchisee, one of your responsibilities as a franchisor is to train them in all aspects of operation so that they will be independent enough to be able to operate their franchise branch without you looking over the shoulder and being there every day. So the question is, how long will it take for you to train a franchisee who does not have any experience in the business that you're in, or in business in general? So the sweet spot here is from about 2 weeks to 2 months. Any longer than that, then it would be quite challenging in terms of fees and in terms of time to be able to train that franchisee. Having said that, we've also worked with franchises that are very technical in nature. So at FranCorp, we worked with, as I mentioned, a dialysis center franchise. We've also worked with medical diagnostic laboratories as franchises. We've also worked with skincare franchises that would have dermatologists as part of their team. So with those very technical franchises, it will take more than 2 weeks, no? 2 weeks, 2 months And in the case of the dermatology services, even more than 2 years. So the workaround for these types of very highly skilled, very technical franchises is that the franchisee should be either a practitioner in that field, or the franchisee can partner with a practitioner or that technically skilled person. And a third option is that the franchisor himself would offer these services to their franchisees. So, for example, with the skincare franchises we work with, part of the service of the franchisor is the periodic visits, the weekly visits done by the dermatologist to the franchisee locations. Next criteria we look at is adaptability. So, if you've been to McDonald's in other countries, you would probably notice that their menu offerings are not the same as those that you're familiar with in the US or in Canada. The McDonald's in the Philippines serves rice and chicken. Probably one of the first McDonald's in other countries to do that. In fact, if you go to a McDonald's in India, you won't even you won't find their flagship products of burgers, cheeseburgers, and Big Macs. So instead of a Big Mac, they offer what's called a Maharaja Mac, which is made out of chicken, and there's a variant that's made out of lamb. And the reason why they don't serve that in McDonald's India is because majority of the people don't eat beef. But even if they don't have burgers, cheeseburgers, and Big Macs, everything else about a McDonald's India store is consistent with the branding and the value offered by a regular McDonald's outlet. So they have quick service, very clean stores, very affordable food, consistency, and so on. So because of their local partners, McDonald's was able to adapt their offering in the country that they're situated in to be able to be relevant and to be able to be in demand in those countries. So will your business be able to adapt if it opens in a different environment, or is it quite fixed and rigid in terms of its product or service offering? Number 5 is we look at successful prototype. So franchising is basically replicating a successful business, a successful business model. So that means if you're to replicate something, you have to have a successful original. So the reason we put this in as a criteria is sometimes we get approached by business owners who have not yet opened the branch, and it's still in the drawing board, it's still in the plans, and yet they're already they're already interested in developing the contracts, the operations manual, and so on. Our advice is to build that prototype first, to get out the kinks, to test and tweak it, to make sure that it is consistently profitable before you start developing a franchise program around it. The other reason why we mention successful prototype is that sometimes we get approached by restaurant owners who would also like to offer a smaller, more affordable format of their restaurant. So maybe a cart or a kiosk or a counter. And there's nothing wrong with that. But our advice is the same, that they first open this different format and to get proof of concept to make sure it's successful before they start building a franchise program around it and offering investment opportunities for that smaller format. Next criteria we look at is continuing value. So one of the concerns of that franchisors have is that what will make what will make the franchisee that I will train on all aspects of operations, what will make them continue to stay on as a franchisee if they already know how to run the business? What will keep them from just opening their own brand and from, maybe even competing with the franchisor? Of course, there are legal provisions in the franchise agreement that prevents franchisee from doing this. But beyond that, the what prevents franchisees from putting up their own business and competing with you is the continuing value um, that they will be getting from you as a franchisee. So the way food franchisors do this is that instead of teaching their franchisees how to make the food items and teaching them the recipe from scratch, they instead supply them with sauces, with mixes, with marinades, with syrups, um, that are already pre-made, that are already prepared beforehand, so that they wouldn't have to teach the franchisee the recipe from scratch and will be able to duplicate it on their own. The advantage of this is that the franchisor is able to hold on to their trade secret, their proprietary knowledge, while at the same time simplifying the operations of the franchisee. So instead, for example, of teaching the franchisee 10 steps to make fried chicken, the franchisee will now only have to learn the last 5 steps, because the first 5 steps have already been done in the commissary and have been supplied to the franchisee. So continuing value is really more of a challenge for many service type businesses. These would be salons, spas, barbershops, and so on. Because once you've already trained the franchisee on how to, how to cut hair and how to render massage, what what would keep them from putting up the business, from putting up their own version of the business under their own brand, if they already know how to do that? Um, Fortunately, no, there are other continuing values, even for service businesses. Um, for example, in terms of their marketing support, in terms of the strength of the brand, and in terms of other franchise or support services. Next two criteria we look at are financial criteria. So we look at affordability and return of investment. So the most affordable businesses, very low investment um, franchises, are usually the most popular because these are the franchises that more people can afford. So in the Philippines, these would be carts, kiosks, counters, small stores, and so on. Um, and these are more affordable than say a full restaurant or a uh like a full diagnostic laboratory. But we also look at the return of investment on that franchise. Even if a franchise is very affordable, if the return on investment takes a long time to take place, then that will not be a very franchisable concept. On the other hand, big ticket franchises like Jollibee, Maxis, Goldilocks, where the investment can be anywhere from $1 million for a standalone store. Those franchises, even if they're the high investment requirements, are quite in demand because the return on the investment is quite competitive and very attractive. Next criteria we look at is market trends and conditions. So what is the demand for your product or service like, and will it be sustainable over several years? So what we try to avoid with this criteria are those businesses that do well only because they are what's called a fad business, FAD, meaning they're selling well, the demand for their product or service is good, but it is an artificial demand. It's not a genuine demand and will not be there for years to come. No? So we would like to see those businesses that have genuine demands that are sustainable over long periods of time. Next criteria is capital. So franchising is a low-cost means of expanding your business because it's the franchisees who will be supplying the capital for the branches. But having said that, franchising uh, also requires capital on your part because to be able to venture into franchising, you would need to invest in developing a franchise program. By this, and I'll go into more detail later on. By this, I mean developing the contracts, the manuals, creating the business plan, maybe building your commissary, and also investing in marketing to be able to get people to become aware of your franchise opportunity. So franchising is a low-cost means of growing your business, but it's not a no-cost means of growing your business. In general, if we were to summarize this even further, a business is franchisable if it works on three levels. If it works for you as a franchisor, if it works for your franchisee, and it works for your customer. So this is what we call the win-win-win scenario. So this is one more than Stephen Covey's secrets, one of the secrets of highly effective people. If it doesn't work for any of these three parties, then the business will not be franchisable. So the program has to be structured in a way that it's profitable for the franchisor, that's you, it's profitable for your franchisee, and the customer sees value in the product or the service that's being offered. All right, so leaving franchisability, we now go to developing a franchise program. So if you were to venture into franchising, what are the pieces that you would need to develop to be able to offer a franchise program? Um, the first step in that process would be what's called the franchise structure. So this deals um, with the financial and strategic structure of the program. And one of the first decisions to be made in terms of the strategic decisions would be the franchise format. So um, these are the most common formats of franchise business, and I'll go through them fairly quickly. So you have unit franchises, an area developer franchise, and what's called a master franchise. So the unit franchise is the one that's most common, and it's the simplest in form. So this is where there is one franchisee who will open probably one store. No, so this is usually offered in your vicinity, in your city, in your state. A franchisee that you will be able to directly support by training them and visiting them, maybe weekly, maybe every other week, and so on. You may have franchisees that are profitable and therefore would like to open a second branch, a third branch, and so on. So a unit franchise C owner will now become a multi-unit franchisee if they open several branches. Another type of franchise format would be one that's called an area developer. So unlike a unit franchise wherein a franchisee probably opens one store, an area developer franchise is a wholesale type of franchisee. So this is where the franchisee does not own just one branch, but they own several. And um, they usually sign up for these number of multi-store franchises one time. So for example, an area developer franchisee would sign up to open 8 units in their city. Usually an area developer franchisee, because of the number of units that they sign up for, would require some exclusivity in that city so that they're the only franchisee and no other franchisees will be able to open in their city or in their region. Um, the third type would be what's called the master franchise. So this is a more complicated type of area developer. And this is usually done in another country or probably in another state. So a master franchise, like an area developer, is one party, one franchisee, but can own several stores. The difference of a master from an area developer is that a master franchise can also do what's called sub-franchising. This is where the master franchisee not only opens several stores under him, but he can also recruit sub-franchisees that he will train, that he will manage, and that he will support. So if you think, for example, about McDonald's in the Philippines, the McGeorge Group of Mr. George Young is the master franchisee, and they own several McDonald's stores, but they also look for sub-franchisees that they can train, they can support, and they can supply to. So this way, they're able to grow the business faster. So this is usually done for another country or another region. The advantage of having a master franchise in another country or another region is that they are more knowledgeable about local business practices, about the local market, about the local culture. So they will be able to adapt your offering in that country, depending on what the market needs. For example, when Auntie Anne's opened in the Philippines, maybe more than 20 years ago already, or maybe closer to 25 years ago, one of the modifications done by the Philippine master franchisee is that they offered a smaller portion of the pretzel. They had a target price that they believe Filipinos would be able to afford, and they downsized the pretzel so that it has lower cost and it's much more affordable to Filipinos. After franchise formats, another in creating the franchise structure, the other thing that would be another decision that needs to be made with how will you make money as a franchisor. So as a franchisor, the most common sources of revenue would be number one, the franchise fee. And this is the initial fee that a franchisee would pay to be the rights to use the brand, the rights to be trained in the system, and the rights to support. So this is an upfront fee that's paid one time. Another source of revenue, and maybe much more valuable in terms of the amount, is the royalty. The royalty is usually a percentage of sales paid by the franchisee, and it's done on a monthly or a weekly basis. So this is your ongoing revenue as a franchisor. And as I mentioned, this is much more substantial than the franchise fee because this is an ongoing fee or a continuing service fee, unlike the franchise fee, which is just a one-time fee. Another major source of revenue for you as a franchisor would be the supply of proprietary goods and services. So these are items, these are products that are available only from you and would usually have something to do with your proprietary trade secret. For example, in the case of baked goods, this would be the actual baked goods, or maybe the frozen dough that will be eventually prepared by the franchisees. Next thing that would need to be developed as part of a full franchise development would be the franchise agreement. And Attorney Mo will be speaking later on in more detail about the legal aspects of franchising. But just let me give a brief overview on the franchise agreement. This is the contract that you will be signing with your franchisees. So this should contain all aspects of that relationship with them. And some of the most common provisions would be term of agreement. How long is the franchise for? Is it for 5 years? Is it for 3 years? Renewal provisions. What happens at the end of that term? Can the franchise be renewed? Are there any renewal fees? Is the length of the renewal the same as the initial term, and so on? Territory provisions. Will the franchisee be given exclusive territory or non-exclusive territory? Um, Fees, of course. What are the fees that the franchisee should pay you? Weekly, monthly, upon renewal, and so on. And what happens if it's not paid on time? What happens if, for example, royalties are understated, and so on? Franchise agreements would usually have provisions on training, initial training at the beginning, refresher training when new personnel comes on board, refresher training, ongoing training for new products and services, and so on. And some provisions on termination and transfer. So what happens? What are the violations that would cause a termination of the franchise? Can the franchisee transfer or sell the business to another franchisee, and so on? The third component of a franchise development of a franchise program would be the operations manual. So this is a very critical aspect of a franchise program. So this is the documentation on how to operate the business. So the assumption that you should make in developing a franchise program is that the franchisee does not have any experience in business or in the specific business that you have. So the manual is a way to teach the franchisees how to run the business, and it's a way for you as a franchisor to maintain control. It also is a way for the franchisee to avoid the mistakes that you may have done in your business when you were starting out. This is also an audit guide. One of your responsibilities as a franchisor is to visit the franchisees to make sure that they are doing well, that they are that they are able to address any issues that come up. As part of monitoring their compliance, the operations manual serves as the audit guide. So basically, you cannot cite a franchisee in violation if the procedure, if the process is not written down in the first place. So very important to have a complete, comprehensive, but easy to understand operations manual. It also makes sense to develop a franchise marketing program to be able to to inform potential franchisees about your brand, about your franchise offering. So what's important here is, aside from determining where you want to go geographically and who your potential buyer would be in order to tailor your marketing plan, is to determine what your unique selling proposition is, so that you can market your uniqueness, your differentiation points. Lastly, it's very important to have a franchise sales plan. So a franchise relationship is really a partnership between you and your franchisee. So it's very critical to pick the right partner. In fact, many franchise professionals would say that franchising is like a marriage, in that you will be in a relationship with your franchisee every day for the next 5, 10, 20 years. So like in a typical marriage, you should take care, do your due diligence before deciding to to get married to a franchisee. The difference between franchise and a typical marriage is that in a franchise environment, you would like to be married to as many franchisees as possible. If you did that in a regular marriage, then you'll be in trouble. But in franchising, you'd like to have as many franchisees married to as much as possible. So we also say that selling a franchise is really more of an awarding process than a typical sales transaction. If selling a franchise is just like any typical sales transaction, then that means that anybody who comes to you with adequate capital, with enough money, then they would be sold a franchise too. But in selling a franchise, we also advise that franchisors do their due diligence in trying to trying to learn about their franchise applicants. Now, what are their values? What are their goals? Will these match yours? So that you award a franchise instead of sell a franchise to somebody just because they have the money. All right. So as I end my presentation, these are some of the key takeaways. I mentioned most common questions that business owners would have before venturing into franchising is my business franchisable, and how do I put a franchise program together? So with that, I discussed the 10 criteria we use to determine franchisability of the business, and also I described program components that you would need in order to be able to offer a full franchise program. All right. So with that, I end my presentation. I'll be back later on to to discuss if you have other questions on the topics mentioned or in franchising in general. But at this point, let me turn it over to Mr. Mo Alturk. Attorney Mohammed, are you there?
Yes, hello.
Hello. Take the floor, please. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you to Chris, to Noel. Thank you to everyone attending. I'll keep my legal comments brief. As the third speaker, I don't want to be redundant with anyone, with Chris or Noel's previous comments, which I agree with. And I also don't want to get caught up in the details of legalese or scare anyone on the call with legalese. So I was asked to speak about the legal considerations for franchising in the US and Canada. And I've just put together some high-level topics. The first of which I think is intellectual property and trademark protection. As everyone on the call likely knows, intellectual property and trademarks are the crown jewels of any franchise system. And so protecting those are of utmost importance. If you're in an operating business, maybe you already have trademark protections, or maybe you're operating under common law trademarks. But I'd say the first step from a legal perspective, anyone considering franchising, is to make sure that trademarks and other intellectual property are protected correctly. So perhaps if you're a franchise system operating in the US, you already have your trademarks registered with the US PTO. But if you're considering expanding potentially to Canada or to Mexico or to anywhere else, the first step again would be to check in those countries and make sure that your trademarks and other intellectual property are properly registered, properly protected in those other countries. So that would be the first legal consideration, is making sure that the crown jewels of the franchise are properly protected. The second, and here Noel walked through the different structures of a potential franchise. So I'll try not to be repetitive, but after making sure that the intellectual property and the trademarks are protected, I would say the second step would be to figure out the structure of the franchise. So as Noel mentioned, there are lots of different alternatives. But because this webinar deals with whether your business is franchisable or starting out in franchising, I won't spend much time on the more complicated structures. But I'll touch on three briefly, which Noel did mention, but maybe talk about the different legal perspectives of each one. So the first is single unit franchising. This involves the sale of one franchise, one unit, from you, the franchisor, to the franchisee. This is probably the most entry-level way of franchising, and involves, from a contractual perspective, a single unit franchise agreement. So again, the offer, the sale of one unit from the franchisor to the franchisee. The next step would be a multi-unit franchise or an area development. Here, this is slightly more complicated. There are more units involved, and likely also more agreements involved. So instead of a single unit franchise, there's potentially an area development agreement, which reserves the territory or part of the territory, which could be a state, which could be a county. And then there's one or more franchise agreements. You can have a multi-unit franchise agreement, or you can have multiple single unit franchise agreements. And then the third model, which is on the more complicated end, is master franchising. Master franchising involves a franchisee, which is now a master franchisee, which is allowed to operate branches or units itself, but then also step into the shoes of the franchisor to look for additional third parties, which would become sub-franchisees. So again, a little bit more complicated from a legal perspective. Now there's a master franchise agreement and also sub-franchise agreements between the master franchisee and the sub-franchisees. So again, thinking through the correct model for your franchise, and I completely echo Chris's earlier comments about, you know, starting slow. If you only have one unit open in the US, then maybe jumping directly to the Philippines doesn't make the most sense from a business perspective, but also not from a legal perspective either. The third legal consideration, I would say, is franchisee recruitment, and Noel correctly touched on this as well. Due diligence is of utmost importance. If you're revealing confidential information, the system, the manuals to a third party, you should make sure the third party is trustworthy. You should make sure that they have the financial qualifications, they pass background checks. But one more legal consideration would be whether they already franchise, and if so, do they franchise a competing business? There can be valid concerns with, you know, allowing a franchisee of a burger concept to operate a competing burger concept. Typically, franchisors are okay with non-competing. So again, to use a food example, a burger concept, allowing a franchisee to also operate, you know, fried chicken or pizza. There are less concerns there, and that's typical in the market. But anytime you get into a competing concept, that should raise particular concerns. I see there's a question about franchising models and structures and whether they're the same in the US and Canada. Great question. I would say that largely across the globe, the franchise structures and models are similar, but depending on the legal regime that applies in a country, one model may be preferable to another. This is a little bit of a more advanced topic, but for example, if a particular country has a franchise law, which I'll get into here in a second, but another country doesn't, then master franchising into the non-regulated country may be preferable from a franchisor's perspective, because you can avoid some of the legal complications and costs of having to comply with those franchise laws. And it may be that you can pass on some of that compliance costs and time and burden onto the master franchisee. But again, largely the franchise models and structures are the same: single unit franchising, multi-unit franchising, area development, sub-franchising. Those tend to be the same regardless of the country that you're in: US, Canada, Mexico, Philippines, anywhere else. But when weighing which model or structure makes the most sense, those country-specific variables can have an impact. So then, the fourth legal consideration I'd like to touch on are those franchise regulations. Broadly, franchise regulations take two different flavors, or a combination of the two. The first set of franchise laws are what are known as registration laws, and the second set are known as disclosure laws. if you've heard the acronym FDD or Franchise Disclosure Document, then you may be familiar with the second set of laws, which are the disclosure law. Some jurisdictions have one of these, some have none, some have both. It just kind of depends on which jurisdiction you're looking at. So broadly, registration laws require the registration of the franchise offering with the regulators in a country. Disclosure laws require the franchisor to prepare some sort of disclosure document, which is like an offering prospectus that includes certain types of mandated information. They typically include information about the franchisor, information about the system, information about the fees that are going to be charged, a preview of what might be in the franchise agreement. And that franchise disclosure document has to be provided in advance of signing a franchise agreement or charging any sort of franchise fee. So now specifically to the US and Canada. The US is a hybrid jurisdiction, so it has, at least in part, both a registration and a disclosure law. The disclosure piece of it covers all 50 states. It's a federal law called the FTC rule. So if you want to, no, sorry, Chris, I see it. It's Chris just sent me a direct message. I don't have any slides prepared. Apologies, as you might have been able to tell from the initial remarks. A different attorney had to drop out, and so I was asked to fill in the last minute. So I don't have it.
No worries, Attorney Mo. I was just double checking just to make sure because I wasn't sure if you thought there was slides. Okay, got it.
Yes.
No worries.
Apologies. So again, the U.S. is a hybrid jurisdiction. All 50 states are covered by the federal disclosure law, and then a subset of 13 states have an additional registration obligation. So those states are California, Hawaii, Illinois, Indiana, Maryland, Michigan, Minnesota, New York, North Dakota, Rhode Island, Virginia, Washington, and Wisconsin. So a franchise in any one of those states, I see there's a heavy contingency of West Coast folks. So franchising in California would require both registration with the California registrar and also disclosure. So Canada, going to Canada, Canada has 10 provinces. 6 of those provinces are disclosure provinces. So there's no registration law in Canada, it's just a disclosure law. And in those provinces, a franchisor would need to prepare a similar FDD, but not exactly the same as the US. Would have to prepare an FDD and provide it in advance of entering into a franchise agreement or receiving any sort of franchise fee. So those provinces in Canada are Alberta, British Columbia, Manitoba, New Brunswick, Ontario, and Prince Edward Island. So what does this mean in practice? If you're a franchisor in the United States, if you want to get into franchising in the United States, and let's say you want to do it in California, in advance of ever entering into a franchise agreement, you would need to spend time and money preparing what's called the franchise disclosure document, the FDD, that you would then provide to your prospective franchisee in advance of signing that agreement. And let's say that same concept wanted to go and franchise in Canada in one of the 6 regulated jurisdictions. Then in practice, you're likely taking that FDD that you prepared for use in the US and modifying it for use in Canada, and then following the same legal process of disclosing the franchise disclosure document, waiting a certain period of time, which in Canada is 14 days, and then being able to proceed to sign the franchise agreement and receive any sort of franchise fee or royalty. So again, that's just a high level summary of some of the legal considerations that any franchisor or potential franchisor should think of before starting to franchise in earnest. Thank you again. I think I will turn it over to Celine perhaps, or open it up for questions.
Yeah, thank you very much, Attorney Mo. Special thanks to Attorney Mo. Our initial speaker had to back out just because they were ill. So Attorney Mo, thank you for filling in and giving us at least a good idea, because one thing we've seen is that the US is really and Canada are some of the very tough legal jurisdictions when it comes to franchising. In the Philippines, it's a bit simpler because the same laws that apply to any business, the same laws that apply to any business applies to most other brands as well, to regular businesses and to franchises. The US and Canada do have very specific franchise laws. So aside from getting into franchising, do make sure you get the right legal counsel to when you get into franchising and cover your bases there. We're going into a Q&A now. So just to let everyone know, that's the end of the presentation side. We'll spend 10 to 15 minutes with a Q&A. And what we did is we also have a lot of consultants joining us today. So if you wanted a one-on-one conversation with someone, something you didn't want to raise in public in a larger group, we will have breakout sessions later where you can chat with a consultant, ask a bit more about franchising, ask a bit about whether it's the Philippines or the US, or just in general franchising. We will have that. So if I could invite Noel, Attorney Mo as well back in, we'll just spotlight you as well. Yeah, so we'll spotlight the three. We'll jump into the Q&A then. I just wanted to ask, does anyone have questions on franchising? So I saw, just to clarify for Canada, franchise fee and franchise agreement, legal guidance. Ron, maybe you'd want to unmute yourself. TC Celine, maybe we can just allow people to unmute themselves. Yeah. Ron, maybe you want to turn on your camera and ask the question you had.
Hi, I'm sorry. The camera is actually on the side of my computer. I am not sure if you can see me. So it's actually on the side. So I'm not really looking at the laptop right now. So I'm looking on a different screen. So
sure.
My question is since my brand is already available in the Philippines, it's already franchisable in the Philippines, and I wanted to expand here at Winnipeg, Manitoba, what are the requirements? Because earlier it's like I'm just kind of confused with the discussion earlier. Is it what do I need to fulfill in order to bring my brands here in Canada?
Okay, Ron, you're based in the Philippines. You have what's your business again?
It's Winkle Tea and Winkle Donut and Glow Up Aesthetic Clinic.
Okay. Noel, you want to take on first from a process side, and maybe Attorney Mo on the legal side?
Yeah, no, you mentioned that you're already franchising in the Philippines.
Yes.
Did I
yes.
get that part? Oh, okay.
That is right.
How many franchises currently in the Philippines? When did you start to franchise there?
It's around 8 right now. It's already 8. The 3 of the branches is ongoing construction.
Okay. In the Philippines.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It's already in Ayala Malls.
Oh, all
All
right.
of the
All right.
brands is already at Ayala Malls, and I'm looking at expanding it at Pure Gold and Mega Mall.
Okay. And how do you plan to expand in Canada? Will you be doing supporting yourself, or are you assigning a
I do have a partner here in Canada that is willing to be part of the master franchise or country's franchise that will actually want to bring in my brands here in Canada.
Okay. Well, if in the presentation I mentioned, things you would need that would be similar in the Philippines would be, preparing an operations manual to guide your franchisees, preparing the strategic plan wherein you make decisions on, what the formats you would like to offer, what are the fees, royalties, and so on. Franchisees would usually ask, how much is the investment and when do I, get a return on that investment? And the franchise agreements as well, no? So from what I know, there are, as Attorney Mo mentioned, there are disclosure requirements as well, no? And maybe even some registration requirements before you're able to sell franchises, maybe in Canada, in the US. So that's something that you may want to discuss further with your legal counsel.
Yeah, okay. All the documents that you have mentioned earlier, I have everything. All of those documents are available, and even the trainings. And I can even ask my training department to fly out here and train the the person that will partner with me here at Winnipeg. Probably, I think I just need to seek a legal advice on how I will be able to execute here locally in Canada.
I see Attorney Mo, switched on his mic. Did you want to add something, Mo?
Yeah, I fully agree with Noel. I would just, reiterate, if your trademarks aren't already registered or protected in Canada.
Not yet in Canada, but in Philippines, it's already registered under IPO.
Okay. Yeah, I would suggest checking to see if you can have similar registrations in Canada. I would hesitate to license trademarks that aren't registered, because then those could easily become, somebody else's property,
Okay.
unwittingly, and then you lose, the ability to protect those and license those to other parties throughout Canada.
Alright.
And then if you have a franchise agreement you're using in the Philippines, I think you should get with legal counsel to decide, will your franchise agreement be governed by Philippines law? Will it be governed by Canadian law? Just because the substance, the details of those agreements will be similar, but there are different nuances given the different legal structure. And then you'll also need a disclosure document for use in Canada.
Okay.
An FDD.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Maybe one thing to add, Ron, you may want to, as we said, after this, we do have consultations with a few consultants. You may want to have a chat, especially as well to understand a bit more about your Philippine operation, if there's something you needed on that side. Because of course, being strong in your home country is will make it easier for you then to expand. And maybe just one other piece of advice is, great you're entering Canada. If you grant a master franchise, typically you wouldn't want to give it to the entire country. So I don't know what you plan to give. Usually I think in Canada they give it by state or even part of a state.
Okay.
So don't make the mistake of suddenly giving an entire country.
All right.
All right. The US, you don't typically give the entire country. You try it state by state or
all right,
or specific areas.
Copy
Got it.
on that.
Thanks,
you.
Ron.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other people have questions? Audie Banania, do you wanna? I saw your question there, but would you wanna get off mute and maybe ask the question? I'll just read your question. I have a restaurant in Port St. John. We're working on opening in Prince George and 7 other places in Canada. Should I open the Prince George under franchise already, under master franchise, or just open it as normal under the same owner? Yeah. Audie, are you here? There. You're still on mute, Audie. And yeah, so you have a restaurant. Sorry, Fort St. John.
It's in BC.
In BC,
British Columbia. Yeah.
And Prince George is.
It's in the same province. Just
Yeah,
bigger than Fort St. John. So actually, what happened is 2019 I opened my business as a restaurant, and I just started in a uh, small location, like 56 capacity. So, but after the pandemic, or actually before the pandemic and after the pandemic, uh, the restaurant is getting busier and busier, and people are lining up. So after the pandemic, we upgraded to triple the size of the capacity, and we are now over 200 capacity, and we're still so crazy busy. So my landlord is a group of companies. They have lots of hotels. So when they see how I run my business, how I run my restaurant, the reputation that I have, they offered me all their hotels, restaurants to be run by me. So they have they have hotels. They are hotel business people. They are not into restaurant business. So they want me to take over all the restaurants of their hotels, like they have in Edmonton, Smithers, Kamloops, Kelowna, um, Dawson Creek, and yeah, in Prince George they have three, and in Vancouver. So um, that being said, it's a bigger opportunity, but I have an option also in the Philippines, because I've been working on bringing the brand to Philippines. So with so much opportunity that I have, it's like it's just hard to where to start. That's
Mm.
why I get interested in having
Yeah.
this webinar open, so can get an idea and how to start it, because we are working
Just
already in Prince George.
Okay.
just
Well,
to
I think first,
clarify,
go ahead, though.
ano lang, please. Just to clarify, Audie, what type of restaurants are operated in the hotels?
What do you mean po,
What food
by that?
specialty? What do you specialize in certain foods, or is it
Oh, my restaurant is we are known for our steak and seafood.
okay?
So
All
pretty
right.
much not, we are offering also fine dining, but we are not really fine dining, so people can afford. So we are on the like the middle, I would say. So
Okay.
it's like a semi fine dining. But in Prince George, we will be opening there's three locations there. So we were gonna be opening same as what I'm running right now, and one is because one is like kind of uh setup is kind of fine dining. So we will be opening two different kinds, because there's no way, or it's not logically uh, speaking, we're gonna be opening in the same city with the same restaurant, right?
Mhm.
So
Oh,
we will be opening different one. One
different
is
times.
different types, yeah.
Okay. Well, congrats on the tie-up with the hotel chain. And I see why you're exploring franchising, no, because being able to open all those all at once would be a challenge, financially
Definitely,
as well as operationally.
especially
Um,
workers is really hard to get here in Canada.
right.
It's like the whole country
And
is a short staff.
correct. No, so for franchising could definitely help, no, in terms of having other branches run by franchisees who are, based in those locations and would be willing to follow the system and stay true to what the brand stands for. Just to clarify though, the way I think you asked about should that be opened under a master franchise. Um, just to clarify, there was also a question earlier about master franchise that was typed in the chat box. Usually, a master franchise would be operating several units in one territory, in one country, for example. So let's say in the example I gave earlier, there's a master franchisee for McDonald's in the Philippines. So um, um, but usually, before you start granting a master franchise, you start granting unit franchises first. So a franchise for one unit, no. So eventually, since a master franchise is much more complex, and usually you're dealing with somebody who has a large capital and expertise to be able to open several branches, you progress to a master franchise format once you've had some track record offering unit franchises. So yes, definitely, I can see how franchising can help you cope up with the demand for your restaurant. I suggest to open unit franchises first and grant franchises for individual units. You may even get what's called the multi-unit franchisee who will open not one but maybe several. No? If you, for example, see that one franchisee is doing quite well, they pay on time, they have good track record in terms of compliance with your systems, then you may decide to grant them another franchise because of their exhibited track record. But yes, no, definitely go ahead and grant franchises one at a time for the units, and eventually look into master franchising when after some experience with unit franchising, and probably for assigning a whole region or a whole province to that master franchisee. All right.
Yeah, and just to add to that, Audie, make sure you have your systems ready, meaning the proper manuals. Whoever has to run it, you want to make sure that you can transfer your knowledge. You've been doing this for quite a few years, so having the right operations manuals, calculating the right fees so that it's fair on you and fair on the franchisee. Do make sure you invest the time looking into that. And after that, of course, the legal side as well. Because franchising is really replication, so you need to make sure things are ready to be replicated.
We are ready on all those paperworks, like for manuals, and we're doing so that we don't have to give the recipe to them as well. So we will be working on a commissary, just like pretty much here in my restaurant, we cook everything from scratch. So what we're doing right now is cooking it like commissary, so that we will just gonna deliver it to them, then they will gonna be directly ordering those products to us. So those recipe that's intellectual property won't be compromised by giving it away, or it's once people get it right, so it's it's I own it, then at the end I lost it, and they might say something that I am the one copying them, right? So
Okay.
Yeah, but the only thing is for example, the print shirts, I'll be opening it under my name for sure. It's just how to go to the franchise level is the one is having more queries about that, or how to start it.
Sure.
Because I'm working also in the Philippines. Next week, I'll be guesting in one of the show in the Philippines to introduce me also to the brand to the Philippine market, and we will be opening one location there to be the location. So once it's become successful there, then we will be start copying, as you guys said, that it's replicating the business.
Sure. Thanks, Audie. And we can chat a bit more after
Sounds
this,
good.
if you wanted. So in the
Sure.
breakout rooms later, so at least we can get into more detail. Thanks, Audie.
Thank you.
Anyone else have any questions? If you had, put in the chat box, or feel free to turn on your camera and unmute so the team can then add you to the spotlight. Anyone else? I saw quite a few other brands, a care center, coffee, the Hilabi project. Any other people have questions?
Chris, I do have one question.
Yeah, TC Celine, go ahead.
The group presented, sort of like a checklist or considerations when being a franchisor or franchising your business. But based on your experience in the companies you've worked with, what would you say would be the top 3 pitfalls or areas that franchisors or companies overlook when going through this process? The most common, would you say?
Yeah, I'd say the top one is the profitability side. So some, especially the lower priced brands, the very low price, it works because they have very, very low price but very, very thin margins. And sometimes there's a difficulty, you have to really think through how to replicate that. Because if you have very thin margins and the person then has to pay royalties and pay other things, it's sometimes those margins disappear. So I think the number one for me is profitability. And that's what we said in the start. If it's not profitable, franchising isn't a magic bullet that suddenly makes you profitable. If you're not profitable, you're just replicating an unprofitable business. I'd say that's a big one. Noel, you want to add, and Attorney Mo, anything
Yeah.
else you want to add?
Actually, mine's even taking a step back. It's really more in terms of the business owners approach to venturing into franchising. A lot of what we have seen is that they tend to underestimate the whole process, and because meaning that they venture into franchising and try to do everything on their own, no? Like a DIY, a do-it-yourself programmer and this is common in the Philippines, no? Wherein since franchising is not regulated so much, then a lot of business owners venture into franchising, copying the franchise agreement of another business or copying. All right, so this concept is charging these franchise fees. Maybe I'll copy the same, and trying to do everything on their own. No? So they tend to underestimate the details and the fine points. So eventually it becomes much more complicated and even more expensive, especially if there are fees that are not computed properly, undercharging fees, and sometimes not being able to offer the support that's needed. No? So my advice is to get proper advice, get proper counsel, work with people who have done this before, so that you don't you don't make these mistakes. No? Many entrepreneurs are successful because of this persistence and their trial and error process. They work at something until they get it right. But that can be counterproductive when it comes to franchising, because now you're dealing with another party, with franchisees. No? So it's not just on your own. Now you're granting contracts, you're entering into agreement. So take due diligence to plan it properly, work with people who have experience, who have done this before, so that you're set out on the right path and avoid mistakes that are, that are avoidable. So basically that's the one mistake I often see.
Attorney
I
Mo,
guess,
anything you want to add? Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I would add similar point to Noel, maybe doing too much or giving away too much early. Often I see the case of franchisors who maybe aren't looking to expand very quickly, but an offer comes in, online or something, let's say for, all of Canada for $2 million. And, they don't have much experience in franchising, and $2 million is a lot of money. And so they say, okay, I'll give my I'll grant exclusive franchise rights to all of Canada for the next 20 years with $2 million. And maybe it's the wrong party, maybe they don't develop, maybe so many things can go wrong. That is the most expensive $2 million investment, because then Canada is tied up for 20 years, or you have to, taking the marriage analogy, try to get a divorce, which is messy, which is expensive, which may end up, if it goes to trial, it may end up costing more than $2 million. And so I would say, the opposite of that, the tip would be, I think somebody said it already, start small, single unit franchising, nearby, test the waters, make sure you have the system down, make sure the manuals are right, make sure, the kinks are smoothed out before you go bigger.
Thanks, Attorney Mo. Okay, any other people have questions? Because if not, we'll get into breakout rooms. But anyone have any questions? Okay, If not, then we'll go into breakout rooms in a bit, and I'll have someone from my team explain how we do that. But maybe I'll turn it over again back to TC Celine.
Yes. So as mentioned by Chris, we will be doing breakout rooms so that you can, on a one-on-one basis, you can do a deep dive on a certain aspect of what you would like to focus on, depending on where you are now in terms of making that decision. But I see Attorney Mo, I understand you have to drop off now, but thank you very much for all your insights. There's a lot of interest about the legal aspect, so hope to have you again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you
best.
for having me
Thank you very much.
here. Take care.
And then yes, so as mentioned by Chris, we will be doing breakout rooms. Maybe really quick, we can do a show of hands for the breakout rooms so that our IT team will be able to accommodate you accordingly. And then while doing that, I did see a question earlier. I think it was Ron, Ms. Ron, regarding question about, along the lines of finding the right franchise. So what we're going to do is on September 28th, Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, that's the day, right? September 28th, we have scheduled exactly that. So another intimate conversation like this to help you, as a business, as an entrepreneur, if you're looking at finding the right franchise for you. So Chris and the team will be back to help out with that program as well. So looking forward to that. And then again, so since we will be doing breakout rooms on behalf of the Philippine Consulate General in San Francisco and the Consulate General, and I see her here. Hi, Consul and Arlene, who stayed with us the whole time, and you were exchanging vibers. Between the two of us, we're learning a lot, right, Consul and Arlene?
Yes, I'm still here listening intently.
Yes, we are both listening intently, and the whole team of San Francisco and Vancouver. Now, having said that, please use us as a resource. Both the Philippine Trade and Investment Center and the consulates in Vancouver, New York, and all over Canada, as well as here in the United States, we will be, we are here to help you connect with the right partners in Manila, like what we're doing now. We will connect you with PFA, and then Chris and his team will help you connect with possible partners. And I hope, Noel, when you mentioned that it is important for our business owners looking at franchising their business to get the insights of other entrepreneurs who've gone through that same route. Is it something that you can facilitate as well together with us?
Yeah, sure. In the breakout sessions, maybe we can also discuss those who would like to expand through franchising, especially in the Philippines, as to how FranCorp can help in that regard as well.
Great. Well, thank you very much. So we'll be putting in our email addresses, and for all our participants, I mentioned in the chat box, we will be sending out the recordings and the presentations from our speakers today. And then we will continue the conversation moving forward. So there you go. And Chris, I turn it over to you for the mechanics for the breakout session. I saw the hand of Jofilo Coffee, who's interested.
Over the years, franchising has been fulfilling entrepreneurs' dreams to multiply their success both locally and internationally. And with one franchise created every hour, the Philippines is now Asia's franchise capital. But what's the secret to franchise success?
Buying a franchise is the easiest and the most popular way to go into business, because statistics show that if you buy a successful franchise format, you have a 90% chance of success.
FranCorp has completed full franchise development programs of over 3,000 businesses worldwide, creating successful power brands that have become today's movers and shakers of the franchise industry.
FranCorp is a one-stop shop for entrepreneurs wanting to grow their brand through franchising.
Our group of consultants are internationally educated and trained, and they have real-world franchise experience. That's why we have the highest number of certified franchise executives in Asia.
FranCorp is behind the tremendous growth of franchising in the Philippines. FranCorp is behind the big brands that started small, if not micro, and now they're ready to go overseas.
We actually started with a small kiosk in 1992, and today, because of a professional world-class franchise system, we are all over the world.
FranCorp offers a complete range of services to assist franchisers.
FranCorp has prepared us properly to start our franchise operations, and the rest is history.
FranCorp continues to help businesses grow from one to many and to witness the unfolding of more franchise success stories. Are you ready to be the next? FranCorp.
It is my privilege to welcome all of you to the formal opening of Franchise Asia Philippines 2022. The show will be occupying the entire SMX Convention Center, so more brands, more Filipino homegrown brands will be showcased.
We, Philippine Franchise Association, is the biggest franchise expo in Asia. Today, we have more than 500 brands. So it's very interesting that I want to tell you that 42% of locators now are new concepts.
Just handle the client, do the relationship, do the marketing, and then let's collaborate and build a strong company together.
Bakit kami nandito? Because we believe the quality or yung trust namin sa FranCorp. Kaya I believe naman na the reason why nandito kami because we want to participate, we want to include with them, with their groups.
The future of Philippine franchising is having more global Filipino brands.
We're preparing for next year. The show will be even 2 times bigger. We have the World Franchise Council of over 40 countries coming next year. So for the exhibitors here, make sure you reserve already for next year's show.